Welcome to Lessons in Leadership with me, Steve Adubato, and my colleague, Mary Gamba. The programming that you're about to see was taped earlier this year. Clearly, so much has changed since then, and unfortunately, a lot of uncertainty and fear remain. However, the issues and the topics raised in this edition of Lessons in Leadership will still matter once we get through these very challenging and difficult times. So without further ado, Lessons in Leadership. Welcome to Lessons in Leadership. I'm Steve Adubato. That is Mary Gamba. How you doing, Mary?
Doing great today, Steve. How are you?
Good. Did you remember when I told you this baseball is all about and why I have it as a prop?
Of course I do. Yes, it is because you were you got voted best coach of the year from your son's little league team. No, I'm kidding. But it was from your son's little league team, and all the kids signed it for you as a gift.
Why is it a joke that you wouldn't imagine or couldn't imagine that I would be the best coach in the league?
I don't think it's a joke. I think that you definitely were. That's why I had to say it.
I was the assistant to the assistant coach.
Were you really?
And I said, kids, would you please sign my ball? No, it's all true. And it was one of the best experiences of my life. Talk about learning about leadership. This is Lessons in Leadership. Mary, tell folks wherever they can find us, which is expanding every day.
By the minute, every time we do this. So first of all, they can find us on Apple Podcast and Google Play. They can subscribe there to get all of our podcasts. They can follow us on Facebook, Steve Adubato, PhD. That's Adubato, as well as on Twitter. And also on AM 970, FiOS On Demand.
What about on NJBIA, the Business and Industry Association?
stand-deliver.com, which is our own website. We have a ton of valuable resources on our website, free columns, information on our books. All of our past podcasts can also be found there as well.
Also want to plug our friends at the Business and Industry Association and ROINJ. It's expanding every time we do the program. I also want to thank our funders who make this program possible, the folks at Prager Metis, the great accounting firm, New Jersey Resources, as well as Hackensack Meridian Health, Valley, the great Valley Bank. We're going to have Ira Robbins going to be taping the CEO with us today, and also International Organization of Operating Engineers, Local 825. Enough plugging. We have our good friend and colleague, Dr. Bryan Price is in the house, the executive director of the Buccino Leadership Institute at the great Seton Hall University. Good to see you, my friend.
Go Pirates. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Steve, for having me.
We should make this clear that we are taping this program. It'll be heard in 2020. Bryan not only is a hardcore Seton Hall University basketball and all sports fans, but we've been to games together. We root for the Pirates. We expect big things. By the way, connect leadership and the Seton Hall basketball program.
Well, it starts at the top, right, with Coach Willard and what he's doing with the team. And secondly, they're going to have to go through a little bit of adversity here since Mamu got hurt.
Talk about that. Let me go back and talk about what the Institute is about. You have a game plan, right? You have your starting five, and this has nothing to do with basketball. It's about whatever industry you're in. You set your 5 players. You've got the next people you want to put in. Then one of your top 3 players gets hurt and is out for 8 weeks. That could be any industry. What does that have to do with leadership?
Oh, 100%. So in the military, we would say things like, no plan ever survives first contact. Mike Tyson would tell you...
everyone has a plan until?
You get punched in the face.
By the way, you mentioned military. I can't, you can, because?
I retired lieutenant colonel, served for 20 years, and retired in 2018.
Go back to this planning. I got a plan. I'm totally focused. I'm going to execute my plan. All of a sudden, things change. You lose your top player. The defense doesn't look the way you thought it would. The marketplace changes. Go ahead.
Sure.
Talk about strategic agility.
Yeah, the only constants in any industry, whether you're talking about sports or the business sector or even in higher ed, is change. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit later about how to, lead this next generation of students. Sure. or leaders in terms of millennials and Gen Z. But you have to be agile as a leader to survive today, because if you're not, you're just going to get run over.
Talk about the Buccino Institute.
Yeah, Buccino Leadership Institute is a pretty ambitious project. You know that because you've been a part of the Buccino Center, which has been the leadership center in the Stillman School of Business for a long period of time, dating back to the 1990s. Karen Boroff and the previous president, Mary Meehan, had this ambitious notion to expand that project university-wide. so that we can provide leadership development across the university in an interdisciplinary way. And so President Nair, our new president, has come on board.
Right?
Yep, absolutely, and has supported the project. And we're in our second year, so no sophomore slump for us.
It's good stuff. By the way, let's plug this. Brian's going to talk about the fact that you have your own podcast that we're going to be collaborating on in
Which
2020.
you've been on.
Yeah, that was one of them. I really had a lot of fun on that. Describe what that is and how people can check it out.
Yeah, absolutely. So we want to provide our students with a bunch of different types of leadership experiences. So leadership is a contact sport. You just don't learn from reading it in a book, although there's some fantastic books out there. So we want our students to actually do leadership. And one of the ways that we tried to do that was to establish a weekly podcast focused squarely on providing insights to undergraduate leaders, because there's no shortage of fantastic podcasts like this one. There are very few that I think are targeted specifically for that college-age student. And so it was an ambitious project. It's completely student-run, student engineer, student folks that do background research, that produce, edit, distribute, all those sorts of things. And so it's the Seton Hall Undergraduate Leaders Podcast. You can follow us on all the same types of platforms that you mentioned earlier in terms of Apple and Spotify.
Podcast, Google Play, and Spotify.
Yep.
Speaking about it, this is a great production operation, but I've also been over to WSOU at Seton Hall, which is a nationally recognized college radio station, and is where you do the podcast.
It is. Another great plug for Seton Hall, and talk about a great leadership laboratory. WSOU, which is, I think, in its 65th year, 70th year, is completely student-run. It's 24/7. Won the Marconi Award a couple years ago for best college broadcast in the nation.
Hold on a second. The Marconi Award. Who's it named after?
Oh, will you stop?
I'm
Don't
just
even. You're putting me on the
Who's
spot.
Marconi?
You think I know? No.
Marconi?
Should I know?
Yep.
Oh.
Discovered the radio. But go back for a second. I'm fascinated by this. The military background you have. And again, I mentioned this book that you know very well. It's called Extreme Ownership, written by 2 Navy SEALs. Talks about their experience. Yeah, their experience in Afghanistan. Question, how much of who you are as a leader, how you lead every day, is based on your military background? Loaded question. Second part, how much of it do you have to leave at the door front, before you go in? Because 99.9% of us, we don't have that background. We don't even know what you're talking about.
Sure, but you do, because I think at its heart, whether you're talking about military leadership or effective leadership today, particularly the leadership brand that Seton Hall likes to promote is all about servant leadership. Putting others before yourself. And I think that type of leadership is not just, it is definitely needed to succeed in the military and to thrive, but it's by no means unique to, just the military. I think we see some of our most effective leaders today who are servant leaders. I think the one aspect that is unique with the military, though, is when you are, oftentimes if you stay in long enough, you're going to be forced to experience leadership in crisis situations where everyone talks about life and death situations, but in the military, particularly if you've been deployed, you experience those things. And that is a very different type of leadership experience. I will say, though, that that's not just military. You see that with our firefighters, with our first responders. We just saw what happened in Jersey City the other day.
We're taping right after horrific events in Jersey City where a very brave police officer was killed in the line of duty.
Yep.
Brian, I'm curious about something. And by the way, let's also disclose that I will be proud to be teaching in the spring 2020 semester, doing a series of seminars with Brian and the students up at Seton Hall University and the Buccino Institute. Okay, those students, do you believe that there's any significant difference, Brian, from being around and teaching the students you teach from, say, 18 to 22-ish? Mm-hmm. Do you believe there's any significant difference in the way most of them, I don't like to generalize, the way most of them view leadership and what it takes to be a leader? And for some of us, we're different generations, obviously. Different time. Different?
Yes.
How so?
So I think the most important thing is when you talk about millennials today versus your generation, you're a little older than I am, not much, but I think when we grew up, leadership had a very hierarchical nature.
Top down, bureaucratic, right?
Yep. You have to pay your dues for a long period of time before anyone asks your opinion. And I think this generation, both the millennials and the Generation Z that's right behind them, are much more comfortable speaking truth to power and don't want to pay their dues. And I think there's pros and cons to both of that.
What are the pros? What are the cons?
Yeah, I think the pros of that is, how long have, just look at the private sector, for generations where you really didn't get a seat at the table until you were in a company for 20 or 30 years. And so how many great ideas did not get, bubble up to the surface until you had to pay your dues for 20 or 30 years. And so, I think you see a lot of stagnant organizations. I'm looking at your table with the Good to Great book on it.
Yeah,
Jim
right
Collins, obviously studied those types of organizations. I think the con of this is when you have a generation that's, generally in power right now that grew up in that hierarchical nature and now is dealing with millennials and Gen Z folks that, are pushing back and want more earlier, that creates some friction in an organization.
I want to just take a moment to, once again, you ever notice how often we thank our sponsors?
Love it. Have to.
Tell folks why you have to.
Well, the folks wouldn't be able to get this great product. We wouldn't be able to be in this great studio.
Right.
And you have to. Taking care of others.
And by the way, the Buccino Institute, funded by Mr. Buccino.
Dr. Buccino.
It's Dr. Buccino.
Represent.
Graduate. He went to Seton Hall.
He did.
Good stuff. Excuse me, Dr. Buccino, Jerry Buccino. How about this? I want to thank our folks at Prager Metis, the folks who sponsor this program, Lessons Leadership. Mary, if I get this wrong, you'll correct me. Prager Metis, New Jersey Resources, International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 825, MD Advantage, St. Joseph's Health, Hackensack Meridian Health, Valley Bank, our good friend Ira Robbins coming in here, the CEO there, and Gibbons PC. That being said, the other side of this whole millennial issue that we're talking about is this. I find it, and it's not just in our boys who, as we do this program, are 15 and 17. Mary's boys are
14 and 17.
Say they're moving into, in a few years, they'll be 20-ish. My conclusion is that a disproportionate number of people in that age range, it's harder for them to, quote, own it, as we were talking about the book, Extreme Ownership, to take responsibility. Do you think there's any significant difference about taking responsibility for younger people today versus there was a consequence if we didn't take responsibility, at least for me and my contemporaries?
Sure, and I think that's one of the problems that we're trying to solve with the Buccino Leadership Institute. So one of the things that's unique about our program is it's 4 years. And so that requires and has a lot of touch points, a lot of high quality touch points with that student.
What do you mean by touch points?
Meaning I will see that student every week for 4 years, most likely, on average, at a minimum.
You're their coach.
So, well, I often
More than the head of the institute.
Yeah, I often tell parents, unless your child is a Division I athlete, there's no other person at the university that's going to see your child more than I will during their 4 years. And what that touch points allows us to do, though, is to give feedback. And so it's not like you take a class and you have a professor and you will never see that professor ever again, or you do an internship where it's a 6-month thing and then you move on. But in this situation, I will be able to provide you feedback, and we give all different types of feedback to our students, and that's how I think you grow.
This is Mary Gamba. If you want more leadership tips and tools, log on to stand-deliver.com. That's stand-deliver.com.
This edition of Lessons in Leadership is brought to you by Gibbons PC, Prager Metis, Valley Bank, New Jersey Resources, and the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 825. You're listening to Dr. Bryan Price, Executive Director of the Buccino Leadership Institute at Seton Hall University. Go Pirates. I'm curious about something. As we're talking about this whole feedback thing, one of the books, here it is. I'm looking for it. Thanks for the feedback. I'm telling you, they're not just props. These are real books that we've read. Every page, no, not every page, except for Mary.
Of course.
I feel uncomfortable plugging my book. Would you?
So I'll do it for
I'm
you.
joking.
So
I have no problem.
We have Lessons in Leadership. You are the brand. Make the connection. I mean, the list
I didn't
goes
say
on and
plug
on.
every book. Stop.
We don't have time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Not enough time.
It's too prolific.
Yeah, but here's the reason I'm mentioning it. The feedback thing, and thanks for the feedback, is one of my favorite books by Stone and Douglas Stone and Sheila Heen, Heen. Is I think most people, Mary and I talked about this on a previous episode of Lessons in Leadership. My experience, I think it is more difficult than I ever realized for people, all of us to some degree, to receive constructive, direct, and sometimes you're not the greatest feedback.
Correct. Yeah.
Can you actually learn to be better at receiving feedback, or is it innate?
No, I think it's a learned skill. And I would also kind of, dogpile on that on the other side and say, I think it's sometimes very difficult for us to give critical feedback of others. And how often do you receive training in doing that?
Natural?
For some people, it's not.
For many.
Yeah, I think it is a learned skill, but some people are kind of born with that because it's a fear of confrontation.
Talk about that. Mary and I are obsessed by this confrontation issue.
Yeah.
No, about I'm talking about healthy, constructive, important, strategic confrontation, not I'm a nasty person, I'm going to argue with everyone. I don't mean that.
No matter how many times we do it, we still afterwards always regroup and say, wow, I could have done this better, or maybe I should have tried this, or I'll give Steve the feedback after he's given feedback to one of our team members. Say, Steve, really, maybe if you use these words instead, it might have been received a little bit better. So even as advanced as we believe we are in the leadership field, we're still learning every day.
Oh, absolutely. And I don't think it's fun for anyone to get critical feedback. However, going back to the learn comment, Dweck's research in her book Mindset talks about the difference between a fixed and growth mindset.
Who'd you mention?
I think it's Carol Dweck is the name.
And the book?
It's called Mindset.
We will include it. Go ahead.
A fantastic book that talks about how we all have areas in our life where we either have a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. If you've ever said something like I've said in the past, I stink at learning new languages, that's a fixed mindset. If you had to flip it around to a growth mindset, it would say, I have in the past struggled with learning languages, but I'm capable of getting better. And that little tweak is important. The second thing I would say is, just going back to your comment, Steve, earlier, is when you take a look at, just in sports, because this is an interesting context, you take a look at the best programs and the best coaches, and they all provide critical feedback to their players, but their players, in the best teams are able to receive that feedback and improve.
If you've never really received that kind of feedback, if you are used to you're the greatest, you're terrific, and I'm not going to get into this whole everyone gets a medal thing, a trophy thing. I think there's something to it, but I'm not going to get into that right now. But if you grew up in a household or an environment, Mary and I talked about how much of our style as leaders is a product of what we grew up around. I grew up around hearing constant, often very unhealthy criticism and feedback, like you stink, you suck, whatever, and that was from my dad, and with a lot of foul language in there. To me, that feedback, and I have to temper the feedback I give, which doesn't sound like that, I hope. The point is this, it's natural for me because it doesn't, now receiving it is more challenging, but giving it is more natural for me because I grew up around it. What about you?
So I, not that case. I mean, both of my parents were
they really nice?
Yeah.
Wow. What was that like? I'm
unconditional.
You seem to be surprised.
I'm so jealous.
I told Steve the same thing about me. My parents were very nice, very kind, very loving.
It was unconditional love. But I also think that you can give critical feedback and still be with love.
A few seconds left. Explain that.
Well, it's difficult, but I think, in order for you to, the other person has to understand that you care for them beyond a transactional level. And I think, obviously parents are sometimes better at doing that with their kids. I think it's tougher for bosses to do that. But the first step is, have you demonstrated the fact that you love and care for them?
You grew up around a family that was supportive of you?
Yeah, 100%.
Wow.
I told you, it is possible.
Andy's laughing. Andrew,
Steve's starting to realize exactly.
What did one of our other guests talked about? What was the show she loved?
Oh, Little House on the Prairie. And I said, that's how I grew up. We were dancing through the fields, picking flowers,
but also,
hugging.
I want to articulate, our family, I grew up with divorced parents, so.
How old were you?
I was in first grade when they divorced.
Oh, wow.
But my father moved about 4 blocks away from us in order to be with, close to us. And so I was fortunate enough to grow up in a time where I saw essentially both my parents every day, even though they did not live in the same household.
Wow.
So kudos to them for raising. And it was myself and my 2 brothers.
Connect this for us. Your view of parenting, not versus leadership, but compared to leadership. Someone says, what are you talking about? One is parenting and their kids. They're 10, they're 12, they're 17, they're 15. Leadership and management is totally different. He's 42. Is it dramatically different?
I don't think so. Like when we talk about our definition of leadership, we talk about
at the great Buccino Leadership Institute at Seton Hall University.
Indeed, go Pirates. We say, it's can you go from vision to reality by maximizing the efforts of everybody on your team.
Try that again.
So, can you achieve go from vision to reality while maximizing all the efforts of everybody on your team? And so when you look at a family unit and, parents and kids, I think, the same rules apply. You have to model good behavior, right? You have to show them the way. Don't just tell them the way. And then when it comes to maximizing their efforts, I think in this age of helicopter parents and everybody wants to step in, you have to take a step back and realize, is that going to be maximizing the effort of your child when they get into the real world and they find out that not everybody does get a medal? My daughter came home just the other day. She's 10. Shout out to Schmoopy back home. And she applied to get they had applied to go to some art show, and she did not get it.
How'd you deal with that?
Well, what's interesting was I learned on a podcast on the way home, Adam Grant, who you may have heard about. He does some organizational psychology, fantastic podcast. So he said, what's the conversation that you always have with your kids, either after a sporting event or when they come home from school?
We were just talking about this, literally just talking about this.
How many goals did you score? How'd you do in your test today? And so he said, flip the script and ask, who did you help today? Because he wants to grow.
Change the questions.
Change the questions.
By the way, one of my favorite books, I hate that we keep doing this, Change Your Questions, Change Your Life by Dr. Mary Lee Adams. Why does the changing of the question reframe the entire conversation? Dr. Bryan Price from the Buccino Leadership Institute.
So, in this situation, he feels as though if we're trying to model the best behavior in what we want out of our children, one of those things that we want them to grow up to be is empathetic, kind, caring people. And so by asking the first question, which is, who did you help today, or who helped you? That's the other question. And so that's how I found out about my daughter not getting that event. I said, who did you help today? And she said, well, I congratulated 2 people that got this experience that I did not get selected for. And I was like, proud parent moment,
Wow.
She did that?
That was the first words out of her mouth. And then she told me, and I didn't get it. And I was like, wow. And I knew how much she wanted it.
Powerful
We're going to keep her.
I would do that
that's
for
a
you.
good one.
Our daughter's 9, Olivia, and who very results oriented. I'm going to keep that in mind.
Well, it's so funny though, Bryan, because Steve and I were talking before. I said I was trying to deal with something and how to deal with my child not enough ice time in a game. He's an ice hockey player. And it's like what to say afterwards, right? When they're really young, it's a lot easier. Once they get to 10, in this case, he's 17. I literally Googled, like, what do I say, right? So when he drives home and he walks in the door, and it said, say nothing. It said, literally hug him and say, you want something to eat? Because he already knows that he's disappointed, because probably why he didn't get the ice time he wanted is because he wasn't performing in a certain way that the coach wanted. So to go into it and dig deeper, the thing that I read said just let them process and let them learn so they can get those self-coping mechanisms and just, move on and make them realize, hey, let's get something to eat, because it's not life and death that you just, had this happen.
And to your point, it's so interesting because we have children, our sons are 17 and 15. And as I said, our daughter is 9, and I have an older son, graduated from Seton Hall with a master's degree in theology and religion and going on for his doctorate.
Awesome.
Teaching at St. Benedict's Prep. We talk about these things all the time, but what's interesting to me is that with our kids, sports, great metaphor for a lot of things going on, they're also potentially embarrassed when they don't succeed or do well or score the goal or make varsity or whatever it is. They're embarrassed with us.
Yeah. Well, because it's in a public setting, too. I mean, they're embarrassed with their friends, their peers, the parents. They feel like they've let the parents down. So
stay on this. This started with a conversation comparing parenting to leadership. You said that, who was it said to flip the script again?
Adam Grant.
And the question was, who did you help today?
Yes.
Or who helped you?
Yes.
How does that, but the kid is disappointed. How is that about leadership?
So I love this. One of the things that we did with our
By the way,
students.
you didn't expect these questions. I know.
No, this is but this is awesome. This is why this is a great podcast. And it's, you ask great questions. It's what you do for a living. So one of the things we do with each of our classes at Seton Hall when the new leaders come in. So we have about 80 students from all across the university, and one of the things we ask them is, "What is your definition of leadership?" And we get all the answers. I put them all into. Have you ever done a word cloud before?
Yes.
So I pump
Put
them into a word
up on
cloud.
a big PowerPoint slide. Go ahead.
And so if you've never seen a word cloud before, the words that are more frequently used are larger, and
Yes.
the words that are less frequently used are smaller. And so it's great to kind of identify what are the common themes, but also maybe some subliminal things you might not catch in definitions. And I did it last year, and the word that the students came up with, the one word that was larger than anything else, was others.
Others. I'm writing this down. Break it down for us.
And so I did it this year, and lo and behold, and I don't give them any guidance. This is the first day, the first class that we have, and they come back with, varying definitions. The word that popped out more often than others was others.
Others.
And so to answer your question is in terms of why is that question so important? Is it in leadership?
The question being, who did you help today?
Yes. Is because if you go to a others mindset, other people matter, to me, that is at the heart of leadership. And that also is one of the things that gives me, I'm very proud of our students when you talk about millennials and how selfish they might be, or Gen Z folks might be selfish. And the fact that the one word that was common in both classes, they don't know each other, was others.
So interesting. By the way, one of the little rocks I hold on to, you can't see it on camera, it's called Pay It Forward, which reminds me that we owe others so much. And the other thing is that and this is not a plug, but in Lessons in Leadership, my book, one of the chapters I enjoyed writing the most about empathy. You remember the subtitle of that? Empathy.
It's all about them.
It's all about them. And we put them in caps. And someone says, well, who's them? Mm-hmm. And the answer was anyone else other than you. The people who matter. How are you communicating to them that they matter? Them means, if you're giving a presentation, I'm not going to get on my soapbox. If you're giving a presentation, I'm so nervous. What do I have to say? What about if I forget? It's all I. Mm-hmm. What about if I lose my place? What about if I get nervous? What about if they see me sweating? If you flip the script, I use your expression, mm-hmm. and ask, how can I be helpful to them, meaning who you're talking to? What is what I'm saying that has value to them? Am I making too much of this?
No, it's spot on. And I don't care if you're talking about parenting or being a coach on your Little League team or running a business or leadership institute, those rules apply.
Final comments. Other than the fact that you're so excited about having me coming on to the faculty and teaching in the spring.
We are.
I'm joking. Stop. Other than that, the thing you're most excited about the Buccino Leadership Institute at Seton Hall University coming in 2020 is?
We are doing some fantastic new things with our students in interdisciplinary team projects.
Interdisciplinary, don't get academic on me. What does it mean?
You put a bunch of kids with different majors on a team on a semester-long project, and then you give them feedback throughout. So these students are identifying their semester-long projects, so they are pitching the idea almost like a Shark Tank experience. They are then we're going to do like a fantasy football draft where they hire their own teams with the only prerequisite being that they choose interdisciplinary. Like instead of, if you play fantasy football, instead of like a quarterback and 2 wide receivers, you got to pick a nurse and 2 business kids, 2 diplomatic kids, 2 education kids. And so we are going, and we also film some of those board sessions. So
outside
I'm super
their
excited.
world.
Love it.
This has been Dr. Bryan Price, who's the Executive Director of the Buccino Leadership Institute at Seton Hall University. I want to thank you for joining us, my good friend.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Stephen. We can't wait to have you come teach with us in the spring.
Go Pirates. By the way, Mary, let people know where they can find lessons in leadership while we thank our sponsors that include Prager Metis, RWJ Barnabas Health, Valley, the folks at Valley Bank, Gibbons, PC, New Jersey Resources, MD Advantage. And where can folks find us?
Absolutely. They can subscribe to our podcast at Apple Podcast and Google Play, as well as on our website, stand-deliver.com. And also on Facebook, Steve Adubato, PhD. On Twitter, Steve Adubato, Adubato, as well as on AM 970
the
website.
AM 970 website, and also on ROINJ on the Business and Industry Association New Jersey website. FiOS on demand.
Yes.
This is Steve Adubato. That's Mary Gamba. That's Dr. Bryan Price, and check you out next time.
This is Mary Gamba. If you want more leadership tips and tools, log on to stand-deliver.com. That's stand-deliver.com.
This edition of Lessons in Leadership is brought to you by Gibbons PC, Prager Metis, Valley Bank, New Jersey Resources, and the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 825. Think Tank, the podcast with me, Steve Adubato, is brought to you by these public-spirited organizations.
Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey, RWJ Barnabas Health, Guarini Institute for Government and Leadership at St. Peter's University, the law firm of Gibbons PC, New Jersey Sharing Network, dedicated to saving lives through organ and tissue donation, Valley Bank, and by Johnson & Johnson. Promotional support provided by NJ.com, Small News, Big News, True Jersey, and by the New Jersey Business and Industry Association.
Welcome to Think Tank, the podcast. I'm Steve Adubato. The program you're about to see was taped earlier this year. Clearly, so much has changed since then, and unfortunately, a lot of uncertainty and fear remain. But the content in this Think Tank podcast and the issues explored will still matter once we get through these very difficult times together. Most importantly, we hope and pray that you and your family are safe. So without further ado, Think Tank, the podcast. Welcome to Think Tank, the podcast. I'm Steve Adubato. We're coming to you from East Main Media Studios in beautiful Little Falls, New Jersey. I want to thank our very generous supporters, our underwriters, that make Think Tank, the podcast, possible. They include Horizon Blue Cross and Blue Shield of New Jersey, RWJ Barnabas Health, the Frank J. Guarini School of Business at the wonderful St. Peter's University, and Gibbons PC. On this particular edition of Think Tank, the podcast, we go on location for a very compelling interview with two folks. And by the way, I'm going to bring in our good friend and guest commentator for this, former Governor Jim McGreevey, who's the chairman of an organization called New Jersey Reentry Corporation. Hey, Jim, how you doing, buddy?
Great. It's a beautiful day in Hudson County.
Great. Hey, Jim, do us a favor. Set up this interview that we did on location. I believe it was at St. Peter's with Michael K. Williams, actor, founder of Making Kids Win, and also his nephew, Dominic Dupont, program director of Making Kids Win. Set this up for us. This was an annual conference that you and your colleagues at the Reentry Corporation have, correct?
Yes. And so the focus of the conference was obviously the struggle with opioid addiction and the relationship, Steve, between prison in the state of New Jersey and the amount of those suffering from opioid addiction. And Michael K. Williams, who has been in this space and is an advocate for New Jersey reentry and working in the community, and Dominic, his nephew, who just came home from, I believe, 20 plus years in state prison, was arguing that in order to help people transition from state prison to home, that they need the services of New Jersey Reentry, not only for housing and not only for legal, but also for medical, and that includes mental health and addiction services. And so we see with the fentanyl crisis, and Steve, I would just add, that this crisis wipes out everyone, regardless of income, status, race, religion, et cetera, that we had 3,000 people last year die, 3,000 the year before. There's a slight downturn, but particularly for people coming out of prison, when their cravings are high to go back to dope, and their resistance is way down because they've been in prison, and they go back, if Jim's coming out of Northern State Prison, and I was doing 10 bags of heroin, and I come out and do that same 10 bags when my resistance is very low, and now fentanyl is being laced throughout the heroin.
Right.
I am 129 times more likely to die of an overdose than the average American. And we see this in heartfelt letters everywhere from Summit to West Orange to Newark to Camden. And so what we do is we're in this space, and if somebody comes to us regardless.
By the way, Jim, sorry for interrupting, Governor. When you say we, New Jersey Reentry Corporation
Reentry.
is dedicated to helping those who have been in prison when they come out to be prepared to reenter society in a meaningful, productive way. Is that a fair assessment?
That's what we do. That's our mission. But I just also wanted to say that if any family member has a young, an adolescent, a young adult who needs addiction treatment services, whether it's detox or inpatient or outpatient, we will get them into treatment within 24 hours. That's our commitment.
Also, let me do this, Jim. I'm sorry, Jim. I want to make sure people understand who we're about to see on camera in this very special edition of Think Tank, the podcast. Michael K. Williams is not only an actor that you will know, he played Omar in HBO's The Wire. He was Chalky White in one of my favorite programs on Boardwalk Empire, born and raised in Brooklyn. His nephew, if you will, Dominic Dupont, who you also see here, he served over 20 years in prison when he was convicted of first-degree murder. He comes out as a very young man, though. So, Jim, pick up your point right there as we go into this interview and why it's so important.
No, it's just understanding that, that whatever the worst mistake is that we make in our lives, that should not determine the rest of our lives. And so, what we do is, and Michael is sort of our champion in our ambassadorship program. And ambassadorship program is something that we've done with law enforcement, and I want to thank the Attorney General. I want to thank the Colonel of the State Police and numerous police chiefs. It's with clergy. I want to thank Cardinal Tobin. I want to thank, clergy throughout the state of New Jersey.
Takes a lot of folks.
And court-involved persons. So it's getting people to say, all right, I'm out. I've got to keep this kid out. And how do we do that? And how do we support him in the community, with new friends, new places, and how do we help law enforcement understand and this kid understand that law enforcement has a job to do and that has to be respected. But if the kid uses or has a meltdown, maybe we can look to treatment instead of throwing his backside back into jail and then back into prison. So it's trying to work together as a team to get people to stay healthy, to stay law-abiding. I mean, the frustrating thing for me, Steve, is when we get a guy out and he starts doing the right thing and he has a job and he has an apartment and he's in a healthy relationship, and then he goes out and does something stupid like relapses. I don't mind. I think it's a great idea to throw his backside in jail for a weekend, but if he winds up going into jail or prison for 6 months, everything that we tried to establish, including the job, the apartment, just gets wiped away. And it's like hundreds of hours of work.
Jim, stay right there because we're going to be joined by Governor McGreevey, who is the chair of the New Jersey Reentry Corporation, right after this interview to offer some closing thoughts. Thank you, Jim. Stay right there. This is an interview that we did, as I said, with Michael K. Williams, Dominic Dupont. This is Think Tank, the podcast, and this is a very powerful conversation.
I work for Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield, and I'm a catastrophic case manager. I'm a nurse. I feel a sense of responsibility to each and every member that I speak with on the phone. I know where they live, I know their towns, I know the hospitals they go to. A lot of times I know their physicians, and I love helping people at very difficult times of their lives. The job I have now is the perfect job for me. I think I was born a nurse.
Hi, I'm Steve Adubato. We're in Jersey City at St. Peter's University, interviewing some fascinating people at a very important conference. It is the annual Reentry Conference. It's actually called the Road to Salvation from Addiction to Employment. We've interviewed the First Lady, Lieutenant Governor, former Governor McGreevey, who heads up the Reentry Corporation, two gentlemen you're about to see on camera, a big part of this event. First, I want to introduce to my far right, Michael K. Williams. He's an actor, The Wire, one of my favorites, Boardwalk Empire. We're talking about his other work. And also your nephew, Dominic Dupont, program director at Making Kids Win, which is?
Our non-for-profit. So Making Kids Win is an organization that Michael started, and I had the honor to partner and work with him for the sole purpose of making sure that we work with young people who have had criminal justice involvement and give them a space to channel their trauma through our programs. And the idea, the concept, the core concept of our organization is that we would find effective ways to make sure that young people have ways and people to connect with, to provide programs to. Our belief solely is that good programming is good security for the community and for those for that individual specifically.
Michael, let me ask you this. You're an active participant in this conference. Because?
Well, mainly because of my past with addiction. You know, that is how Governor McGreevey and I we met at a it was a local treatment center right here in Newark. We had met.
Why were you, okay? You met Governor McGreevey while you were in treatment?
No, while I was staying in Newark. There was a point in my life where Newark, the streets of Newark took care of me. You know.
How so? Were you doing the wire?
Yeah, I was during the wire, and I was struggling within my addiction, and while I was working, and I needed safekeeping, to say the least, and I found that refuge on the streets of Newark with a family right there on Isabella Avenue, South Orange and 18th. We're talking smack dead.
In the South Ward of Newark.
Yeah, I never felt safer. And it was during that time, these 4 or 5 years, I stayed in Newark, right there in the streets. While I was filming The Wire, a large chunk of that, I lived right in Newark. Yes, sir. While I was filming there, I met my brother and mentor and pastor, the late, great Dr. Reverend Ronald B. Christian.
Oh, Ron Christian,
Yeah.
what a extraordinary man who made a difference in the lives of so many.
And mine included. It was, we're talking about, I'm a man now, my 30s, and I didn't become a man until I landed on the streets of Newark, because it was through these streets that I had my relationship with God through the Reverend Ronald B. Christian and Christian Love Baptist Church. It was from those relationships that Reverend and I built together that led me to Governor McGreevey and the work he started on my path to doing, started here in the streets of Newark.
Let's talk about this. As I said, this is the annual Reentry Conference. We're at St. Peter's University in Jersey City and Newark. In fact, two of the biggest cities in this state. But this is a national phenomenon, a societal issue. And you, Dominic, you're not just Michael's nephew and doing important work right now, but your experience, your background. At 19 years of age, convicted of a very serious crime, a murder.
Yes, sir.
Spent how many years incarcerated?
20 years, 7 months, and 18 days.
It sounds like such a cliche. Need to ask you, the impact that had and has had on you, your life, and your view of life today is?
So I think it's had a huge impact. I spent some of my teens in prison, all of my 20s, all of my 30s, and started my 40s prior to being given the privilege of executive clemency from the governor of the state of New York. And the word clemency, which a lot of people don't really know what that root word means, is mercy. So my life was impacted in a really huge way by being extended mercy. Incarceration has had a huge impact on my life and on the lives of people that I care about that are really close to me. And that was the catalyst to me doing the work that I've done in prison, and that work has transcended from prison into the community.
Excuse me, I want to be clear. That clemency, in large part, came because of your work in prison, because of the impact you were having on others who were in prison.
Yes,
right?
sir. Yes, sir.
I need to ask you, why did you do that? Why did you feel the need to help others?
Thank you. That's a really great question. So
as opposed to, I'll get out when I get out, because then I had a 25-year hit on that.
Well, the minimum was 25 years.
Okay,
the maximum part of my sentence was life. So I could have never, ever been released had the parole board and the governor deemed that I had not been not only fit to be released, but fit to be released early.
Why'd you do that? Why'd you make a difference for others?
So I think it was important for me to understand that reentry was a process. And that process started the moment that the handcuffs went on. And that I didn't have to wait to be free to start that work. I was in a place where people needed assistance with their trauma and with challenges and the different things that they had experienced that had led to some of the bad decisions that they had made that had led them to prison. And a lot of those things are huge social issues that we're having conversations about that have been around for hundreds and
Such
hundreds of
as?
years, such as poverty, such as unemployment, such as
racism.
such as racism.
Institutional racism.
Absolutely, such as class.
Such as health.
Jump in, Michael.
One of
Yeah.
the first programs he started, I remember when I started hearing him with this dialogue, it was foreign to me. I was like, what are you doing? What are you doing there? He said, oh, I'm mentoring the young men that's coming in here that have HIV. And I was like, huh? I couldn't, this is
What did
like-
that mean to you?
I never done time, so I never knew. All I knew was what people would tell me when they would come home, and you hear the horror stories. So I'm thinking, my little nephew is in there with this dark, and he's. I go see him, and I would lead the visit. I would be crying, and he would be like,
Why were you crying?
because I couldn't take. There's a picture in Raising the System, when I go to his cell, and he pulls up a picture of me, him, and another man in the picture. He was 15 years old. I used to take him on the road. They had special ID to take him up north, right, to go visit our cousin who was then in prison for the same thing. And then 3 years later, thinking like, okay, we can go visit our family because we don't abandon our family, and I can also show my nephew this is what you don't want, right? And 3 years later, that's exactly what happened for the same same circumstance.
Right.
So
While on break from Bible college,
okay, so this is this was this is my
19
nephew.
years of age.
19
On
years of
break
age,
from
good boy,
Bible college.
college. Didn't smoke, didn't drink, didn't sell drugs, didn't do drugs. We're talking. This is my nephew. So him going into this situation that I only heard about and I only heard bad about, it was very traumatizing. And then, but the other side of that is, as time went on, and I would talk to him, go to visit him, he had this glow about him that I didn't really get. But he started, I would say within 5 years of him being there, I remember him mentioning this conversation about him mentoring or working with people coming in the prison that had HIV and AIDS issues, like health issues. He would help and I didn't know what that looked like, what it sounded like. It was just foreign.
But what's so interesting, that had an impact on you, and clearly had an impact on you, and ultimately over time had an impact on the governor and others who granted that clemency. By the way, if you're just tuning in, I want to give a reintroduction. We're speaking with, on my far right, Michael K. Williams, an actor who you recognize from The Wire, from Boardwalk Empire, from so many other. He's just an extraordinary artist who cares deeply about the issues that are being explored here at this conference, the annual Reentry Conference, from the road to salvation from addiction to employment, and also his nephew, Dominic Dupont, who's a program director at a terrific program called Making Kids Win. Let's do this. This whole Making Kids Win, you started it.
Yes, sir.
What year, do you remember?
It was during the Wire years, I'll tell you that much.
Hold on, during the Wire years, when you were dealing with your addiction issues on the streets of Newark, you started a program?
Yeah, while I was dealing with my addiction issues on the streets of Newark and filming The Wire on the streets of Baltimore, I was the Professor Charles Ogletree from Harvard University.
The great Charles Ogletree.
The great Charles.
Our fans on PBS remember him. He used to do a series of roundtable discussions on the Constitution and law. Check him out. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, please. And so he had started the first, at least my knowledge, the first Wire 101 class at his law department department at Harvard. So I guess at the end of that first semester, he had wanted to reward the class with a visit from the cast of The Wire. So he assembled, and he just bring us and meet and greet, whatever.
So you're up at Harvard?
Yeah.
They haven't invited me yet, but go ahead.
They didn't realize they invited the sickest puppies in the bunch. Sonia Song, Wendell Pierce, Andre Royo, Jamie Hector, myself, Donnie Andrews, God bless his soul, who the character Omar was really based on, right? We went up there, and the first thing we said was, if you're here to talk about Hollywood, you got the wrong crew. We all got very personal issues with our own personal relationships to The Wire, to the stories that the people that these stories are being told about, and we want to talk about the change that needs to be done. So there'll be no more television shows like The Wire. That was how we went in on that, and needless to say, that turned into a relationship with us and Harvard, and over the space of about 2 to 3 years, several symposiums, what I believe they call them, and Ogletree took me under his wing, and throughout these years, he'd always pull me aside and say, Mike, so when are you going to start your nonprofit? And I was like, no, Tree. You must be talking about Jamie. I know we're both dark skinned. He has a scar too, but he's doing Moving Mountains. That's wrong guy. So he said, no, Mike, I'm talking about you. And he kept nudging that over the space of these 2 to 3 years, where I broke down in tears one day at Harvard, and I said the reason why I don't want to do this is because I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to do it. I don't have what it takes. I don't have the education.
You didn't have the confidence?
No.
Despite your stardom, despite the fact that you had so many fans, me just being one of millions, that didn't do anything for your sense of self?
I didn't think I had a voice I didn't think my voice mattered at that point, still at that point in my life. Where we come from, I didn't think my voice mattered. Who's gonna wanna support me in an organization that I wanna help my community?
Who's gonna give you money?
Who's gonna believe me or give me money? And you know what they said to me? Don't worry about that. We'll take care of that for you. All you gotta do is bring what you already have, passion.
That's right.
And
that's how it started?
And Professor Ogletree put these young ladies, his students, around me, and they put all the nuts and bolts together, and they registered, but it didn't become, I didn't do anything with that. That's what I'm on record until he came home.
Let me ask you, Dominic. So you come out. Tell everyone when you got out.
So I got released January 22nd, 2018.
You come out. You know what your uncle's been doing. You know his stardom. You also know his struggle to the degree you can. Absolutely. Right? What do you think you owe at that point to him and to so many others who are struggling?
Yeah, so at that point, I really had a desire to make sure that I continue the work that I was doing in the prison. For me, it was work that was really relevant, it was really important, and I wanted to find a way to make sure that I could still tap into what the community needed. So I left the prison community and came into the community as a whole, and I was like, look, Michael, and there's a part in the documentary where we speak about that, and
he's even a polite version of, can I keep it real with you?
Keep it real.
This dude is a pit bull. He sat me down in a visit one day.
This is your nephew?
This is my nephew. This is before he knew he was going to be, it was no knowledge of the clemency, but he spoke it, right? We in a visit one day. There's no cameras, right? He's like, listen, Unc, we need to insulate you.
Insulate?
Yes, that's the word he used, bro. He says, we need to put we gotta like insulate you. That's the word he kept using, and I knew in my heart what that meant.
What does it mean for the rest of us?
I need to be more careful around the people I keep around me. I need a stronger team around me, and more efficient people, and more thinkers. People that will tell me what I need to hear, not what I want to hear, right?
No, not talking about people just to hang with.
No. Because he saw the vision in a sense, maybe not really saw it, but he saw it, right? And when me and him started this dialogue, I would say the last year and a half of his incarceration, he brought this in a visit. It called me to the visit and said, that was the topic, we're going to insulate you, is the term that he used, right? It was during the last 2 years of us figuring out how that looked, I got this vision. I said, this is starting to make sense now. I think that whatever platform that was given to me in entertainment is not random, that these characters, if you look at all the characters that I played, they tell a narrative in a sense, right? That's not coincidental, right? I believe that was laying foundation for when this man came home for him to step onto that platform to do the real work. Like, he's the real star. I'm here with him, right? You're
a team. Let me try this. For those of us who were pretty protected growing up and insulated, and those who may never have been in a city growing up, explain, and it doesn't, not only a city, explain to folks the kinds of challenges and struggles the young men and young women we are talking about who often wind up incarcerated, who this conference is all about, to try to get them to reenter society, complicated by drug addiction. Loaded question, I know. Talk to us.
Can I really
Sure.
First of all, our narrative needs to change in regards to our community, right? We're talking about the community we're talking about. we talk about programming. First of all, it's not brain surgery. There's no resources. These are young adolescent minds. Just like it's not. We need to change the question of why are you acting like that? Like what can we do to prevent this?
What's the right question?
So we're looking, what can we do to prevent this?
That's the question we should be asking.
Yes.
Not why did you do it?
Exactly. So we talk about the neighborhoods that are insulated. You know why they're insulated? What they're insulated with? Normal activity, programs, outlets for their children to go and exercise. Resources. Long story short, so when we talk about this for my community, I'm changing the narrative. I'm not asking for anything great. This is it's like, can you please put it here? What's taking you so long? Why is this not here for my young people, my children? There's nothing for them to do.
But part of it is you're changing it yourselves. You're changing the narrative yourselves with the work you're doing. Fair to say?
Well, we don't have an option to do anything else.
What do you mean? Got a minute left. Go ahead.
What I mean is that we as a community, we are losing generations and generations of young people. We are charged with a responsibility.
To incarceration, to addiction, and to death.
Absolutely.
Trauma.
And this idea that some kids are fighting for a second chance that come from our communities, the real issue is that a lot of our kids are just fighting for a first. And that concerns me. We are the land of the free. Why is poverty not a crime? Why are our young people why is this happening? Why are we allowing this to happen? And our goal is to make sure that we find effective ways to make sure that we prevent losing another generation.
Gentlemen, you honor us by taking this much time to be with us, to talk with us, to share with us, to offer a piece of your very powerful and compelling stories at this annual conference, the Reentry Conference, the road to salvation from addiction to employment, to Michael K. Williams, the actor who Chucky White is a character, but Chucky White and Boardwalk Empire would never have been that character if not for you and your colleagues, and also The Wire. Your work there speaks for itself. And Dominic Dupont, you've just been out for a relatively short period of time, the program director at Making Kids Win, but we know you're going to continue making a difference every day. So you honor us by being with us. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you so much. We're honored. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. It's one of the more powerful interviews I remember doing in the 3 decades I've been a broadcaster with Michael K. Williams and Dominic Dupont. We're joined back again on the line with Governor Jim McGreevey, who is the chair of New Jersey Reentry Corporation. They sponsored this conference over at St. Peter's University. Jim, what's the biggest takeaway? You got about a minute left. What should people take away from all this?
The biggest takeaway is if you have a son or daughter that is coming out of jail or going into jail or prison or addiction treatment, or you know somebody in trouble, go to our website, NJ Reentry, that's REENTRY.org. And thanks to Governor Murphy and President Sweeney and Speaker Coughlin, they finance, and our job every single day of the week is to help people that are either addicted or have a life of crime and need help with legal services, medical services, employment and training, mental health, and addiction. So put us to work. We need to be of service to those that are broken and those that want to live a healthy life. And so please give us an opportunity to serve you and your loved ones. And Stephen, from the bottom of my heart, thank you, to Michael, to Dominic, because if we save one, we're doing something right.
That was Governor Jim McGreevey, who is the chair of New Jersey Reentry Corporation. If you wonder what has the governor been doing since he left office, he's been making a difference. So thank you, Governor. This has been a very special edition of Think Tank, the podcast. We'll be back next week. Once again, check you out then.
You may not have heard of TAVR. Raj and Sandhya have. It's the minimally invasive alternative to open heart valve replacement. RWJ Barnabas Health is New Jersey's leading TAVR provider, and we continue to perfect it. Patients are often back to their lives in just a few days. Innovative valve replacement surgery. Because you can't be replaced. RWJ Barnabas Health. Let's be healthy together.
Think Tank, the podcast with me, Steve Adubato, is brought to you by these public-spirited organizations.
Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey, RWJ Barnabas Health, Guarini Institute for Government and Leadership at St. Peter's University. The law firm of Gibbons, P.C., New Jersey Sharing Network, Valley Bank, and by Johnson & Johnson. Transportation provided by Airbrook Limousine, serving the metropolitan New York, New Jersey area.
I work for Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield, and I'm a catastrophic case manager. I'm a nurse. I feel a sense of responsibility to each and every member that I speak with on the phone. I know where they live, I know their towns, I know the hospitals they go to. A lot of times I know their physicians, and I love helping people at very difficult times of their lives. The job I have now is the perfect job for me. I think I was born a nurse.